Hi folks, and welcome to Gersnet, the Independent Rangers podcast by fans, for fans, for all the content is absolutely free, coming to you in association with Forest Precision Engineering. My name's Alec Anderson and I'll be your host this evening, Friday the 10th of February, as we ask, what do the Scottish Cup and Partick Thistle mean to us? What are the main differences so far between Michael Beale and Giovanni van Bronckhorst Rangers? Are we as a support too confident about Sunday's match? How many regulars should we rest for this game on Sunday before it gets a bit risky? And of course, just to be highly original this week, what about that European Super League if nothing else? Has it made us realise we're all just about winning lots of silver shiny trophies rather than getting stuffed by big famous foreign clubs? Before I bring in my special guest, I must mention our sponsors, of course. Forest Precision Engineering, established in 1983, is a leading precision engineering and special purpose machinery manufacturer based in Glasgow. Their services in precision engineering are available to companies all over Scotland and throughout the UK. They are leading manufacturers of special purpose machinery for a range of applications, and their website is at forestprecisionengineering.com. They're big friends of Rangers, and they have a stunning new hospitality area within the Ibrox main stand. For information on how to book the Forest Precision Executive Lounge, a unique and intimate space, email the club via hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Now, unfortunately tonight, before I bring Patrick in, quite sadly, we got a few sad bits of news this week. So I have to mention Billy Thompson, the passing of Billy Thompson earlier this week. I was along at the Rangers B-team game at Dumbarton on Tuesday night. It was a lovely minute's silence observed by the young lads on Tuesday night. I'm sure it'll be the same again on Sunday, because Billy Thompson started his career as a goalkeeper at Partick Thistle. I didn't actually realise this until I saw the obituaries to him this week. Only 64 years of age, far too young. Billy Thompson, he came to Rangers in the latter stages of his career purely as backup to Andy Gorham. So he only had a handful of appearances in the league, but I was there that night. A lot of us around my age were. He come on for the second half against Juventus in the Champions League, and that was a bad night for the club. But no fault of Billy Thompson's. Juventus, a great side. Vialli, Ravanelli, Del Piero, they went on to win the Champions League that season. But I think it proved the respect that Billy Thompson was held him, and Walter Smith had gone to him. We lost Andy Gorham in that game to injury. We could bring on a man who at that point was one of only two Scottish goalkeepers who had actually previously played in a European final, two active Scottish goalkeepers who'd played in a European final. Billy Thompson, when I was growing up, I was a kid. I was maybe 10, 11. He's in his early 20s. I primarily remember him as a keeper with St Mirren and then Dundee United. And he played in the UEFA Cup final with United in 1987. He actually made his name and a good European run for that great St Mirren team of the early 80s. And they played against the likes of Saint Etienne in Europe, and Billy Thompson acquitted himself brilliantly as always. Really sad to see him go. And as we know, he then went on to coach at Rangers, and he trained the likes of Stefan Klos and Alan McGregor, who I think along with Andy Gorham and Chris Woods are probably two of the greatest goalkeepers I've ever seen in my life. So a fantastic effect in all of Scottish football, and a really sad loss. And just on behalf of everybody at Gersnet, we'd like to pass on our condolences to the Thompson family, and also have to say that the death of John McMillan, the former president of the Rangers Supporters Association, later on this week. He was 89, John, when he passed away. Really sad news, and everything the club's been through and this century, really, particularly around about 2012. There's a lot of people coming forward, myself included, wanting to have our say, supposedly in behalf of the entire Rangers support. But I think there's only one man who really all Rangers supporters were glad to be represented by, proud to be represented by, and that was John McMillan. He come across as a really down-to-earth man. He saw the more as a duty and a responsibility, very, very humble. When he was talking in behalf of Rangers, it certainly wasn't part of any kind of profile-raising agenda he might have had, like a lot of the people who've been talking on behalf of Rangers over the last few years. And it was pretty much the epitome of everything that a Rangers supporter should be. So it was really sad news there. And I'm sorry to have to start like that, but it's been that kind of week. So it's great for me as an old boy who's been hit hard by the passing of a few familiar figures this week, to be able to introduce Patrick Caskey, a man whose youth is something I'm going to be really self-conscious about all night and go on about endlessly, Patrick. So first things first, I see from trolling your Twitter account, you're a bit of a basketball fan. I asked Stuart Weir about the NFL last week. I'm going to have to ask you about LeBron's NBA records. What did you think of that?
No, fantastic. I think obviously he's a one-of-a-kind athlete. He's either 1A or 1B, depending on your take. And probably your age, it's a generational thing of best basketball player of all time, whether it's him or Michael Jordan. And then given, as we'll mention earlier, as we go on, Rangers in the mid-2010s wasn't great. The club was still the club, but there weren't exactly players you could idolize. So as someone trying to look for someone to look up to in an athletic capacity, LeBron was one of the guys who I looked up to personally, because we didn't have the McCoys, so the Andy Gorhams, the Richard Guffs at the time. So you had to look outside of your sort of club you support and look to individuals. And I think he's probably the epitome of sort of a complete human being when it comes to both basketball and off the court. So I was very happy to see him play. I did not manage to wake up at 5 a.m. to watch it, but I did spend a good hour or two seeing all the great messages on Twitter afterwards.
Oh, bro! Yeah, I'm just pretending that I know anything about basketball, Patrick, to make myself seem young and trendy, like I hang about with you. But it's I get what you're talking about. And it actually goes back to Billy Thompson. When I was a kid, kind of growing up, Rangers were in a really bad phase mostly, and Billy Thompson used to come in. And something that always annoys me. I don't know if you've seen this. Guys going about in the retro Rangers kits, and they wear that one from the kind of 78 to 82 period, which is the kind of multicoloured collar, kind of floppy collar and V-neck, which I think people think is really cool and kind of, you know, the epitome of kind of retro trendiness. But it always just fills me with horror, because we were a terrible team at that point, and it was St Mirren and Dundee United were finishing above us in the league at that time. Billy Thompson would come out, and he had blonde hair, he's well over 6 foot, really lanky, wearing these kind of super trendy Adidas kits that St Mirren and United had at that time. And I always thought he looked kind of German, or so I think the highest compliment you can pay to anybody from Linwood, especially, is that they didn't look in any way Scottish. You know, he looked like kind of, and it was somebody you kind of looked up to and admired. So I definitely get the vibe there. And I've also got to ask you, obviously, I see you're a fan of the popular music. You know, as somebody who likes a bit of ragtime and the big band sound myself, you know, I would have to ask you, what did you think with Rangers tying up with the trendy kind of hipster cutting edge artist AC/DC? Did you like that? Or if not, would you have any recommendations yourself?
No, this was something I was completely taken aback by. Not in terms of the collab. The collab kind of came out of nowhere. Obviously, there's the Scottish roots, because obviously the original lead singer was Scottish, as far as I'm aware. But I thought people like my dad and my uncle, two things they love are Rangers. And I don't know if he loves AC/DC specifically, but I remember listening to a lot in the car that he and my mum would put on. So I thought people of his age and just general people would be very excited about the collab. It obviously would be a bit out there, because it's a musician and a football club collab, but I still thought these were two things that probably hit the sort of, you look at social media algorithms for a lot of Rangers fans, AC/DC and Rangers will be two things that tick the boxes. And I thought perhaps the timing wasn't great. I think that's what most people were in gripes with. I don't think the designs were particularly bad. Castors had quite a few poor designs. I don't think these were bad per se. But I did think these would go down a bit better. As for artists to collab with, I'm not sure. I think we've seen there's 2 or 3 guys who've been signed up to play Edmondson House already, so you can get them as a good idea. The music I listen to will probably be frowned upon by the majority of the Rangers fans, and they probably wouldn't want to associate with the club. So we'll steer clear of me getting sort of advertising and sponsorship opportunities with musicians.
Great, right? Yeah, I thought it was quite funny. We were having the arguments earlier in the season about Rangers continually bringing out more kits and monetising the fans, and I don't have kids, but I don't understand dads who feel obliged to buy their kids every kit that Rangers release. And I noticed that a lot of them were very, very quiet when it came to the AC/DC kit. Like, I don't think they were rushing out to buy that one for the kids. But personally, I wrote to James Bisgrove. I thought if we're going to be represented by anybody, there's a man who's, as you say, much younger than the lead singer of AC/DC, tours Britain much more regularly than AC/DC, who've kind of betrayed Scotland and moved over to the penal colony over there. And I think the only reason that we haven't teamed up with Daniel O'Donnell, it must be down to, the Rangers board going back to their old habits. I mean, Daniel O'Donnell just releases so many albums every year. He's a total mainstay of the British music scene, and I think we've got to have a look at ourselves. I thought we'd get rid of all that with the signing of Maurice Johnson, but never mind. I'm going to try and get back onto planet Earth here. I'm enjoying myself too much, Patrick. Can't have a transfer and tactics guru like yourself on the programme without asking you what you think of Michael Beale's kind of vision and his blueprint and his progress so far. do you feel the squad, is looking good after the kind of January transfer? I mean, I think we're going to be talking about the January transfer window basically until the summer transfer window opens. I was asking Stuart about it last week, but I have to ask you, how do you think only one player of any kind of note leaving, only two coming in? How do you think this is fitting in with what Beale's trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously discuss the January window until the summer window, but I think this January window can probably only be evaluated properly given time, and especially what we do in the summer. Because if we perhaps but delayed and deferred us going to buy a goalkeeper or a striker, right winger, on the basis that we found someone and they'd be better positioned to go and sign for us in the summer, fantastic. If it was on the basis that we couldn't find anyone and we have no idea what we're going to do in the summer, then that's a bit of a failure. So the two people we did bring in, happy with both. Raskin more so than Cantwell. Not to say Cantwell's not good and exciting, but I've just watched more of Raskin and written about him in the past, so that was nice to see. And those two are sort of archetypal deals, hopefully, that we get to go through moving forward, both relatively cheap, young, high potential. Cantwell has shown flashes of actual ability far beyond what we need. And if he's able to rekindle to that, he will give us both some good memories and go for healthy profit, because he is sort of the perfect profile for us to sell, because the main people shopping in the upper echelons of Scotland, basically Celtic and Rangers, are effectively just English Premier League teams, or that's who we want to sell to, ideally. And Raskin perhaps doesn't have the English, but he has the 3 years younger than Cantwell, and he looks fantastic. I think the 10 minutes we saw him last week was a bit exciting and whetted the palates for everyone going forward. But most certainly, there certainly could have been a few more players brought in if we were talking about trying to win the league. But even then, I think we're probably 3 or 4 players away from having a complete squad. And I don't think any amount of players that we sign could make other teams better, as the basis of us having any chance of winning the league and doing the treble would be on Celtic dropping points out with the games against us, because we have 2 against them. And if we win 2, that's fantastic. Even if we win 1 and draw at them, that's also very good. But it still leaves us 4 or 6 points away, because we have to consider their goal difference is 11 or 12 better than us, and that's as good as a point. So at this point, it's beyond our own control. So I'm not looking at other clubs' January windows and critiquing them, but they didn't get good enough to beat Celtic. But I do think that we're perhaps 6 months away from having a good squad, hopefully, knock on wood, post-summer transfer window.
I think you're absolutely right. That point you're making there about other teams needing to take points off Celtic if we're going to win this league. I think that the fact that Celtic lost kind of fairly early on in the season to St Mirren and drew ourselves, when we've had a recent unbeaten league season by Celtic and then ourselves, I think it's maybe kind of distracted us from the fact that they just win every other game. They've only dropped points in 2 games this season, and it's like I don't even bother checking this. I used to excitedly check the score to see how somebody was getting on against them. Just not worth it anymore. So yeah, I think unfortunately that's a spot on point you're making, Beale. In terms of, as I say, I'm no tactical guru myself. I loved to go on about how confused I was, and in the best possible sense, by what we did at Tynecastle, the kind of movement, the fluidity. I don't know if someone like yourself who maybe studies that aspect of the game a bit more than me sees it that way. Is it more a case of I've been so used to the rigidity of even the Gerrard system and particularly the Geo system, that any kind of movement up front just kind of blows me away. My eyes can't handle it. What do you think he's trying to do in an attacking sense, or is it just kind of horses for courses and he's very fluid himself, Beale?
No, I think any change will be welcomed, and I don't think he's ripped up trees per se relative to especially what Gerrard did, and to a lesser extent Gio. But there are differences, and those differences range between very subtle and more obvious. I think the most obvious was just the almost borderline sort of paradoxical look of how when Cantwell and Kent, I think it was against Ross County, when they were just wing swapping every 5 minutes, and it was basically positionless football, which a lot of people say is what the game is trending to in any capacity, in which there's just complete sort of players have skills and they're plugged in and doing so. And it worked well for us. It was fun on the eye. It manufactured quite a lot of chances. We saw also Morelos taking place in that, and we saw sort of completely fluid front 3, which was fun. It might have, much like playing out of the back, scared and frightened a few of the older gentlemen and ladies, just on the basis that it's so different and the striker should stay in the box and score their goals. I mean, we saw that just as Gio arrived and Morelos started scoring again. People were like, thank God Morelos isn't playing a defensive mid anymore. And now we see Morelos playing like that again, and he's playing well. But yeah, I think perhaps if we want to look at sort of a case study as to what Beale's done, we can just look at Ryan Kent and both freedom he's been given positionally, because under Gio, he was sort of supposed to stay wide and play very much as a traditional winger, which you would think would play to his strengths, because what is he good at? He's good at taking players on and creating chances, and he's not fantastic at scoring or getting into scoring positions, or even his shot selection is almost so frustrating, because you'll see many a time where you think he should shoot, but he takes out a touch, does a Ronaldo chop or something, and then ends up sort of fizzling out. So you would have thought that would have been his best position, but now we see him sort of assuming a more central position, like a wide 10, giving more roam, playing within the width of the penalty box, which gives him less distance, so it's easier for him to play with Morelos, short distances, and also when we have players running off him from the midfield, also shorter distance from him to play off, and he's great in tight spaces, so he's thriving. He's added a few goals, I think, since Beale's come in. He scored 2, which must have been as many as he scored under Gio in the sort of 11 months, but we've also seen him rack up a litany of assists, which has been good, and I think he's probably been sort of the emblematic change. Hopefully he continues to do so, and obviously there's been some movement as to a contract or a lack thereof, and it seems that we're in a decent position, but that's relative to if you trust who's saying that. But I think hopefully we see him continue to trend upwards and sign a new deal. But I do think his sort of position as freedomless or lack of, the freedom, but also the sort of expectation to stay narrow relative to the extreme width he played with under Gio is probably the best example of what we've done. It's just a subtle position change. We're not asking him to do much more different. We're just putting him in a position to be more successful. We've seen that with other players like Tav and Glenn Kamara as well.
And that's, I think, the difference it makes on the eye from what if you're used to watching Rangers with any kind of intensity. And I think I'm screaming, oh, he's everywhere. Kent's everywhere, and he isn't. He's not everywhere. He's just so much more, covering so much more space than he was under the previous manager. But yeah, we'll need to go on to the Scottish Cup itself. Thistle, if we went out to Thistle, I mean, I think it would be pretty much an unmitigated disaster. No disrespect to them. It would brutally reframe kind of Beale's tenure when it's still fairly nascent. Putting the particulars of Sunday's match to the side for the moment, how important is the Scottish Cup to yourself, Patrick? And I know, I mean, again, I'm doing the age thing. When I was growing up, you know, when I first remember football, it was like this 1977 one was Rangers were in 8 successive finals. I kind of grew up first watching it on the television, and then I went to the last couple, which, I mean, we only won half of those 8 finals, but it was just a kind of staple of kind of guaranteed, you know, glory almost, or a big day out at the end of the season. I'm imagining it's been different for yourself. So how important is the Scottish Cup to yourself, and how important should it be to Rangers, both historically and for this season?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is probably a complete juxtaposition to the one you just mentioned, on the basis that it was almost a nothing for the vast majority. I think most people have a collective memory of football once they're sort of 10 or 11. Anything beyond that is just blurs and stuff like that. So I remember obviously 2009, but very subtle images of it. I was 7 at the time, so I don't actually remember watching the full game, but I remember obviously watching it back, the 9-men win, which was great. But after that, it's just a sort of collective patchwork of failure mixed in with relative success. Obviously, like 2 of my favourite football memories are semi-finals in the Scottish Cup, the Celtic 2-2 and the penalty win in 2015 it was. And last year, the Old Firm in the semi-finals, which I was lucky enough to go to because it was on the day after my birthday. So my flatmate and I were sat in the hospitality bit of Hampden, and that was quite fun. Very, 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 very tiring, the full 120 minutes. I can't imagine what the players were doing. But yeah, it's almost this sort of elusive piece of silverware which should be brought back on a semi-regular, maybe annual or biannual basis. Obviously traded with the League Cup as well, but it's just sort of eluded us, at least in my lifetime, or my active football watching lifetime. But we have been a bit more successful in the last few years, but ultimately has been sort of to our own heartbreak, where we've built up. We've got to a semi-final or a final, I think it was Aberdeen, where Lewis Ferguson scores the header in the 89th minute. That was either the Scottish Cup or the League Cup, but regardless, I think that's a good microcosm of our fate in the last few years. But I do think, on the basis that getting, let's say, the League Cup obviously is in 2 weeks, and that's really important for Beale, because he's able to sort of put his foot down this early in, ensure that on the basis of what he's been here, we'll be the best team in Scotland if he wins that cup, and we have sort of maintained parity with Celtic in the league. And if we were able to bring a Scottish Cup as well, you'd have to sort of flip the conversation when it comes May. And let's say if we keep some sort of pace right now with Celtic and obviously end up losing the league, sadly, But if we take 2 cups home, and more specifically and bigger at the Scottish Cup, you have to consider who's had the better season per se, at least on the basis of the last 6 months, because we'll break our season into 2 specific ones. The first one, not great with the Champions League disaster and Gio coming out. But then we look to the second half in which you've had a new manager, and it's really all sunshines and roses, hopefully. So this will obviously be the first bit on getting to that. And obviously in 2 weeks with the League Cup final, that'll be the more important one. But I do think Partick Thistle offer something on the basis that I think Beale had said this is almost like a free hit for them, and it is probably the textbook definition of a free hit. They're coming to a nice big stadium. It's close. They'll bring tons of fans. They'll be loud. I'm not really clued in as to their form in the league, but they've got a few guys who can do something. I think Scott Tiffany is one who in the Championship looks really, really good. Obviously, he's not been able to replicate in the Premiership, but they're not without good players. I think Brian Graham, someone who it might give like Ben Davies a bit of trouble, because he is sort of like the classic target man Scottish football, kind of trading with elbows. But no, I do think the Scottish Cup's important. You would hope that this would be a relatively low-key and stressless affair. But again, if our cup logic proves anything over the past few years, or even sort of the past half decade, that we don't really trade in stressless games.
Yeah, I feel as if that Lewis Ferguson, that was the League Cup semi-final, that one. So I felt as if when we beat Aberdeen at Hampden a couple of weeks ago, again in the League Cup semi-final, that was a kind of catharsis for that. Winning the Scottish Cup itself last season was catharsis, I think, partly for Seville a few days earlier, but mostly just for our form at Hampden generally. As you're saying, it's been horrendous since we come back. And it's always kind of symbolic. Rangers at Hampden, it should be, we're winning more than we're losing when we should always be getting there. We should be getting, most of the time we're getting on to the final, and it should be, we're winning more finals than we're losing. I think also for me, I can't help it. Celtic, I think we're 6 behind Celtic in the all-time Scottish Cup winners list. We've won it 34 times. They've won it 40. I think it's the year I was born, 1969. Celtic gubbed us 4-0 in the Scottish Cup final to win the treble, and also to I think equalise. I think it was the last time we were level with them on Scottish Cups, and they went ahead of us after that. So I'm just a massive jinx. So if the Scottish Cup, if we could somehow start bringing it back home on a regular basis, that would suit me well. My whole life I've been trying to catch up with Celtic. It's the only one of the major Scottish trophies that they've won more often than us. As you say, I think no Europe post-Christmas. The league, I mean, so it could be over soon. I don't want it too downhearted. So it gives the fans something to look forward to for the rest of the season. Helps Beale maintain that momentum. And kind of segueing with the upcoming League Cup final, nasty question, kind of horrible question, I think needs to be asked. Are we still at the stage in our kind of development from 2012, getting ourselves back up to speed after 2012, where, stopping Celtic winning a treble is a priority we don't want to admit to, but it's maybe the kind of first stop for us each season. You're talking about that semi-final last season at Hampden. That was one of the first things that came to my mind. It wasn't just about Rangers progressing and beating our oldest rivals. It was a case of, they'd so recently won 4 straight trebles. We're still kind of, maybe 55 seasons kind of, again, had us thinking too much of ourselves. Are we still at that stage where just to make sure we get even the League Cup sorted by the end of the month takes a big pressure off us?
Yeah, you would have hoped 2020-21 was us turning a new leaf when we just gubbed everyone in the league, but then also we had given up both cups, and we have to really look back at it in a revisionist sense and say, we only won 1 trophy, and that obviously isn't in any other year really. Celtic would have taken 2, and they would have had some sort of consolation. But I think in the hierarchy of priorities, beginning at this season, my first thought would have not been stop Celtic winning the treble, it would have been us winning the treble. But as is, and how well they've been playing, which we have to admit, obviously, the current thing is obviously you can phrase it 2 ways: stop Celtic winning the treble, or we want to pick up the cup double. The optimist and the one looking within our own sort of positive will say, let's do the cup double. But I think perhaps it's not as important, but it's sort of creeping up there. It is stopping Celtic winning the treble. It's sort of the classic argument. Do you like Rangers more, or do you hate Celtic more? And I think this is the perfect, if someone gives them the answer, I want to stop Celtic winning the treble, they'll hate Celtic more than like Rangers. And I think there's obviously literally answers to that question across the spectrum, but everyone will say obviously that winning the cup double will be important in the sense that we pick up silverware, maintain momentum, and obviously stop Celtic doing so. But we're obviously at the point in which Celtic aren't guaranteed to make the League Cup final, nor are we. But if you're a betting favourite, you better be an Old Firm derby in both cup finals.
Yeah, and I mean, I must admit, I mean, anybody who knows me will tell you, I mean, I actually get slagged by a lot of Rangers fans for often holding the hand out to Celtic fans. It's definitely, for me, it's still, even despite everything that happened in 2012, more about loving Rangers than about despising Celtic. But I think it's one of those, you can't separate. If you just see this as our biggest rival, as the only thing standing between us and kind of all-out glory each season, if you like, we've got ourselves back to that stage. Another one of the kind of, to explain what I mean, one of those kind of dirty truths was when we first come back into the top flight. I think that's the only time in my life I've heard Rangers fans talking about second place being acceptable. That was the one, having been, for 4 seasons in the lower divisions, second place acceptable. And of course, straight away, we finished third both the first seasons we come up. Yeah. And it was like Steven Gerrard takes us to a level straight away where we're looking at our failure to win the league the first 2 seasons under Gerrard, and nobody was noticing the fact that we'd actually, second place, we were so far in front of the third place teams each season that we'd kind of sorted out that problem. That was a kind of problem Rangers never wanted to have. And I think it could be the same thing in terms of stopping Celtic winning a treble is still part of the journey, that we maybe not want to admit to. But again, not going into particulars of the game this Sunday just yet. Partick Thistle, geographically, I think they were kind of closest rival to Rangers. I know we now, with the pyramid system and all that, strictly speaking, I think it's Ben Bourbon, St Anthony's are closer than Partick Thistle, but as a traditional kind of historic rival. They're a really historic club. I think a lot of people won't know that only the second kind of match in European football in Britain, the European Cup, was played at Firhill. And that's the sound of my computer about to run out of power. I forgot to plug it in, so saving the day there, like Andy Gorham used to. But I live in a Partick Thistle heartland. I'm surrounded 2 doors down. I see people kind of leaving the house all the time with Thistle colours on. I've been to Firhill 3 times this season already, watching the Rangers youth team playing there in the European Youth League before I would go off to Ibrox and see the full team getting gubbed by Ajax, Liverpool and Napoli. And we had some intense tussles with Partick Thistle at Firhill when we first come back into the top flight. They were only in it for 2 seasons. We kind of missed them on the way up, and then they were dropped back out of the league after 2 seasons. I don't really seem to have a lot of kind of interaction with Partick Thistle and Rangers. What do they mean to you as a club, Patrick? Apart from a kind of better version of the Galatasaray and the Mechelen kits, how do they feature in your kind of personal Rangers landscape?
Yeah, throughout my lifetime as being a Rangers fan, we have hardly interacted. I think the only prevailing memory outside of the Atletico Madrid Rangers Youth League game, where I think it was Rodrigo Raquelme, they played at Firhill, and he was absolutely fantastic.
Nice.
And that was good, but was James Tavernier's really good goal when we won 2 or 3-1 at Firhill. And I can't remember the return leg at Ibrox for the life of me, but I can remember Tavernier putting it top corner on BT Sport in 2017. Additionally, it was always a joke. Obviously, I grew up outside of Scotland, and people, when we play FIFA, would see Partick Thistle and think there was something to do with my name or I was from there. So that's probably the only interaction outside of Tavernier's top bins goal. But yeah, it's one of those clubs in which just have completely missed us in our climb up. I think Green and Morton are a good example, in which I don't think they hit us in any single capacity when we were going up the league table, and they missed out on thousands of pounds doing so. So Partha's not to the same extent. I don't think we'll see them next season in the Premiership. I think they were touted to be one of the teams going for promotion in the Championship, but admittedly, we do have a really good title race in the Championship, and Queen's Park are top, so there might be a different Glasgow team to talk about soon. Exactly.
I mean, that's Thistle. They're kind of 10 points behind another Glasgow team in hoops, so that's we're only 9 points behind a much younger Glasgow team in hoops, another team than Queen's Park. But I think to contrast the situation they're in just now ourselves, Thistle are kind of uncomfortable fourth in that championship, but the teams behind them only 2 or 3 points behind them, so they're just hanging on to a promotion playoff spot. When they dropped out of the league in 2018, they dropped out of the top flight. They didn't show. They never really looked like coming back. They've never been close to promotion. They've actually dropped down into League One controversially. They dropped down into League One. The season was curtailed because of COVID. They made their way back up under Ian McCall, a man who knows his stuff. He's like kind of their manager was over kind of 25 years in the game. I saw Ian McCall scoring for Rangers against Andy Gorham. Andy Gorham playing for Hibs from the main stand. We beat Hibs 1-0. Absolute cracker of a goal by Ian McCall back in, I think it was 1988. So he knows Rangers. He played for the club. He knows them well. I think this worries me. But there is an attitude, I think it was coming out of Beale as well to a certain extent today, even though he was saying all the right things in the press conference. This game's kind of a formality. Is this a dangerous attitude? Is it the wrong attitude? But I feel as if, apart from maybe 55 season where we beat Cove, we hammered Cove, and then we beat Celtic at Ibrox, we then went on to go out to St Johnstone. Even when we've been winning Scottish Cup games or League Cup games at Ibrox recently, the past kind of, I don't know, 5-6 years, we're rarely impressed at home in these games. So are we wrong? It feels as if Sunday should be a kind of formality.
Well, I think if we're looking at the club-facing and player-facing approach, that's never the right answer, is that the game should be a formality. You and I can say it's a formality. Yeah. We can definitely tell to the opposition fans it's a formality at our own behest of us then losing and getting sort of pie in our face. But I understand why they're doing so. Obviously, you mentioned Partick Thistle aren't exactly in the best position. They're not the worst position in the championship. And we've got up a nice piece of form. But even still, it's the nature of the cup. I think it's the English FA Cup line is the magic of the cup, in which anything can happen. And stranger things have happened. But I do think perhaps if we look at our previous league or previous cup games against lower league opposition in the past year, I forget who it was at the beginning of this season when we won 2-1, and it was an absolutely terrible game. Sakala played poorly, and then last year with Stirling Albion we won 3-0, but wasn't exactly the most comfortable. No. And in a way it was decent. It was probably the prodigal return or performance of Aaron Ramsey, which we never saw again, and we saw Zukowski play for him to never put on probably a Rangers shirt again in his career.
We did see it. It did happen.
Yeah, outside everything was the Cove Rangers 4-0, and we beat Falkirk quite easily. I think it was, and Bassi got his debut goal in the 55 season. We haven't, unless I'm missing, I probably will be missing some of the. Maybe if we dropped someone quite substantially, but I don't think it's been to the sort of ease or the extent which we would hope so when we're taking on these lower league teams. And that's a compliment to them that they make it perhaps not a game, but they make it not fully plain sailing. Partick Thistle, as we said, have some players of interest, but yeah, I think it's the only way we lose is if we probably play down to their level. We tinker with the squad a bit too much, although you would say that a team has sort of 1A or 1B in terms of the best squad in Scotland, probably 1B at this point, and I don't think many Rangers fans would disagree that Celtic's squad is on the whole slightly stronger, that we could probably perform any sort of concoction of 11 players who are sort of earning a wage at Rangers and put out a team that should handle Partick Thistle comfortably. Obviously, that was something we discussed is who's to play, but I think really it would be some sort of concoction of several failings and sort of death by 1,000 cuts for us to lose to Partick Thistle. And I think if anything, it would probably happen in the 90th minute and we'd all go home very sad. But I really don't see that universe happening in any capacity.
I know. I think, as you were saying, they're bringing, so far it was 2,000 fans and it's 2,500 fans. And again, kind of having gone from Firhill 3 times this season to see us then stuffed at Ibrox in Europe, I'm taking a bit of that, kind of mood with me. Like, they're probably going to be the biggest away support we've seen at Ibrox this season after Liverpool. Probably the worst night I ever had at Ibrox. It's a short journey for them. So nothing to lose. I think the last time we played them in the Scottish Cup, I think, was at 2007, 2008 when it was a draw. There's no replays this season, but we had to go back to Firhill, replay that season. We've actually played for Partick Thistle in the Scottish Cup final twice. Partick Thistle's only 2 Scottish Cup finals. They beat us in the first one, 1921, and it took us to a replay to narrowly beat them. The second time we met them was back in 1930. They're one of those clubs, I think St Johnstone, East Fife, St Mirren. There's maybe another who've won the Scottish Cup and the League Cup but haven't actually been champions of Scotland. There's definitely a bit of kind of heft about Thistle historically, and I just feel as if we've kind of struggled to put away sides who don't necessarily come at us, not just under Michael Beale recently, but obviously kind of the past couple of seasons. And I just feel as if they're not actually much worse than Ross County, who gave us the kind of the drop in standards from basically the kind of even the kind of 3rd, 4th place in the Premiership down to the middle of the Championship. There's probably not much of a drop in standard there. So I think there's potential there if we're not on it. And you say, I think it was Queen of the South in the League Cup this season. We struggled.
Yes, yeah.
Dundee in the League Cup. That was a terrible game. Steve Davis scored early, and we just looked like we couldn't wait to give it away thereafter. It was an awful game. But hopefully the Beale's going to have them champing at the bit. And on that, given the fact we don't kind of seem fit enough after it's been reported that Gio wasn't, giving them an intense enough kind of pre-season, I don't know, does everyone need to maintain a kind of builder match sharpness, this new kind of 1 game per week schedule? Do you think it's best that Nicholas Raskin is the only player we can get minutes into the legs of this? Should we be going out with a kind of full team to keep them sharp and maybe building them up for the League Cup final and for this game at Livingston, or should we be resting a few? What do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely give, if we're looking at players who haven't been involved substantially in the last 2 or 3 game weeks, so Cantwell, on the basis that he arrived to a few weeks earlier, we'll just say he's part of the embedded squad and sort of the first team rotation. Outside of that, yeah, I think Raskin has a future there, and he will, when he's up to fitness and up to sharp, I think he'll probably start. I think he's definitely of the quality to start. So I do think this is probably the perfect game to get him sort of his minutes to his legs, on the basis that he will see a lot of time on the ball, and that's the best thing for getting sort of readjusted to playing, is having your touches, playing with your teammates, because I would expect us to have upwards of 75-80% of possession, maybe even. So if we allow him to get almost sort of, if we have possession for 50-60 minutes of the game, considering that football, despite being played for 90 minutes, hardly ever gets 90 minutes of possession time. We'll see him sort of develop passing combinations, play with other players, and sort of get used to the game model per se. I think that'll be really important to see him play a full 90. But I wouldn't be surprised if he gets subbed off at 60 or 70 on the basis that people in the sports science department probably have some sort of formula on the basis of how much you've played, how much you've trained, what's the acceptable minute sort of percentage of the game they can play. Outside of that, I think if we look at other players, the strikers, it's a toss-up really. I think both would equally be likely to score. I think probably the one player who I wouldn't play in this game, and it's not out of fitness concerns, would probably be Sakala. I love Sakala, as many would probably find out if they follow me on Twitter. But I think he is not suited for the slow game at all, especially one which will probably set up with a 5-3-2 or something like that. Flood sort of just plays super deep, 2 low blocks or 2 blocks of 5 almost, low blocks, limited space between. And for as much as he is good on the ball, his skills aren't great when cramped in with 3 players around him just outside the penalty box. He's much better with an explosive game, in which there's greater spaces between the lines in which he can penetrate. So I really don't think this is his game. Inevitably, anyone who plays should do well, just on the basis that we are the better team, and Sakala could definitely play it and play well. I just think if we're looking at the sort of risk rewards, I think playing someone who's more akin and more sort of capable in tight spaces, playing quick interplay, that probably better suited to our fortunes. So one could say Scott Wright could be that. I think what would be nicer is Alex Lowry play a sort of prolonged cameo, that maybe not even a cameo, so it's more of a full 90-minute performance, as that's someone who is always want to see play, much like all the Rangers Academy products. But I think Scott Wright or Lowry instead of Scala could be fine. Tillman on the right, I don't think he's best on the right, and he's playing really well, so I'd rather keep him central where he's thriving. But outside of that, I think, again, you could put the 16 players, put them in a random number generator and generate it, and you probably won't get a wrong answer.
Oh, you're right. The one that's getting me is John Lundstrom's out. That was confirmed by Beale in the presser today. Lundstrom is out for now. And that 11th minute substitution last week against Ross County, when Lundstrom was injured and he brought on Tillman, we were all expecting it to be Sakala. That seemed, a lot of us had wanted, sorry, we thought it was going to be Kamara, beg your pardon. But a lot of us had been thinking, not myself particularly, but I see a lot of the talk on Twitter had been, why do we need to go with 2 sitting, so to speak, against somebody like Ross County, who came out much more than they're given credit for. They came to kind of play in their own way last week. There was no kind of deep block going on there. Do you think that this mean when bringing on Tillman instead of Kamara last week, a move that he says almost surprised himself, Beale? Are we going to let Raskin play on his own as a kind of single pivot and as a 6 on his own at this stage of his career, at Ibrox, this stage of his fitness? I'm really kind of confused about what the options are going to be there. I would rather see him kind of babysat by Jack or Kamara on Saturday, on Sunday. But as you say, the way Thistle are much more likely to go, they're going much more likely to go to the kind of low block than Ross County were. Do you think maybe just Raskin on his own and as a kind of sitter, and then it's all out attack from everybody else?
Long term, definitely. Yes, long term, 100%. I think that could work on the basis that he acclimatizes well to Scottish football. And there's an abundance of evidence in Belgian football, which is perhaps not as physical, but is almost there. It is, for as much as the sort of the Benelux game gets a lot lauded for its passing, which it does, it is also very physical. Obviously, Scotland, I think, is a complete outlier and probably to its own negative, in which our physicality sort of meanders into violence at some points. Not like outright punches thrown, but some bad tackles, which we might see. So on that basis, on Saturday, I'm not exactly sure who Partick Thistle would line up with in the midfield. But I would assume that one or two of them played professional football on the basis that they are great athletes, perhaps on the lack thereof of skill. So we might see a few crunching tackles. So we might want someone to sit by him, I think Ryan Jack, perhaps, just to show him the ways of how Scottish lower league teams play, not to sort of be offensive to Partick Thistle. It'll probably be a sort of game and a game modelling which Raskin will have not encountered in Belgium, maybe in their equivalent of the league or the Scottish Cup in Belgium, in their cup, when they play someone from the fourth or the third division. But still, I think someone who's perhaps a bit more streetwise and can help him. Not to say that Raskin can sort of adapt on his own. That's one of his best qualities, his adaptability and his diversity of skills and variety. But I do think there is a question to be had at the fact that maybe just have someone who understands what's going to be thrown at them to play alongside Raskin. But again, if we line up with something like Raskin, Cantwell, Tillman, that would be great on the basis that we're playing how we should, not on the basis of the opposition, because this should be a game in which we provide ample opportunity and ample profiles for us to profit off their sort of extended possession we're going to get. But if I was to pick the three, I would probably play Raskin at the 6, play Kamara at the 8, just because he provides that sort of duality of being able to sort of provide a double pivot at times when they want to bring into that. But then he can also do some stuff in the final third, which Jack admittedly can do different things in the final third, but I think Kamara's qualities there might be more appropriate to what we see against Partick Thistle. He's better holding the ball in prolonged extended periods of possession, and he almost has that quality of slipping through banks of 5 or banks of 4, what we might see, and breaking those lines, whereas Jack is more of a run, direct, pure box-to-box. And then Tillman is a 10. But I don't think you can really go wrong in that many combinations. But if we're looking at it for a long term, I'd like to see Raskin playing as a 6.
I think you're talking about the Benelux countries there. I felt as if there's a few bookmarks to our great European runs of the last few seasons. Like when one of them, I think, was the loss to Progress Niederkorn, when we seemed to, for the next few seasons, just take total revenge on the whole the Benelux region. We were doing absolutely fantastic until we met Ajax, and then this season, and that was the beginning of the end. But anybody who doubts as you say, the kind of combative nature of the Belgian league it's going a few years back now, but it's the worst tackle come assault I've ever seen. It's Axel Witsel for Standard Liège against Anderlecht. Oh my God. The guy's leg, I don't know who it was.
It might have been Stefan de Voort, because I think they have a rivalry. It might be that, and I think they played it once, but don't quote me on that, but that could be it.
Yeah, it was absolutely. It's one of those ones you realise what he's done to the guy's leg, and you have to look away quickish, and you know why Axel Witsel kind of went to play abroad sharply after that. It wasn't just for the money; it was to get the hell out of Belgium. He'll be all right, Raskin. He's had a good education when it comes to that side of the game. Čolak and Morelos. You think we're going to see the two of them? Čolak come on the last couple of games. I know he's coming back from injury. Come on at Tynecastle. Come on and Saturday, and he looked like he was towing. He actually looked like he was towing Alfredo Morelos behind him. He's very, very slow looking. Do you think any chance of seeing the two of them together?
We could on the basis that if you're going to throw it on, you're going to do it in this game, in which is sort of low stakes. But I don't think we can carry two strikers in the sense that it's well documented Čolak's not great in possession, and I think we're going to see a lot of possession 10 yards from the goal, trying to break down what is just a siege box. And I don't think we can carry two forwards who sort of trade in their ability in the penalty box. Morelos is obviously great in linking up. It's perhaps the sort of unique factor in which makes his profile so great and better than what we've had at the club since he's been here, pretty much. But I don't think, in the sense that like Čolak could work if we manage to just penetrate completely and we'll manage to feed balls into the box. But again, if you sort of match the strengths of Čolak and what traditional Scottish centre-backs are good at, he's going to probably be not better than they are by their centre-backs, but negate his quality there, because what we see generally in Scottish centre-backs is that they're quite good in the air, quite large lumps of wood, to be fair, and they jump well. So I don't think in the fact that we're sort of negating one of his key skills, and that if we're going to ask him to drop deep and sort of interplay, as we've mentioned, with the full fluidity of the three when Cantwell, Kent and Morelos played, you're just going to set him up for failure. So I think if we're able, and our game plan is just load the box completely and cross the ball, which I don't think will be good against Partick Thistle, as our disparity in quality should be sort of best advantaged by playing through them, not over them, then Čolak and Morelos could work. But in an ideal world, I would just see just Morelos. I think for as much as Čolak is a flat track bully and he's scoring well, I just think we'll need more penetrative skill. But again, I really wouldn't be surprised if he plays and scores a hat-trick, just on the basis that he showed great form of doing so and scoring goals. And we easily could win 6-0 against Partick Thistle if everything goes right.
I think one of the things, apart from the kind of ongoing orgy of drugs and violence, one of the things I love working for Gersnet and doing stuff with Gersnet is we've got a fantastic range of contributors, and I love that thing where I know we all become entrenched in our positions sometimes when we're voicing our opinions in football. I love that kind of moment we get people on. Usually shows I'm not on, I can sit back and listen to it properly, who changed my mind about something. Actually genuinely put a point across, not in an aggressive way, but you think, oh God, yeah, that's right. It makes you think again. For instance, you're talking about Cantwell. I wasn't interested in signing Todd Cantwell, and then Dougie and Stuart Weir were on a show a few weeks ago, just basically kind of said, just common sense stuff, and they just totally convinced me. And I was like, yeah, and I'm really hoping that's going to continue to bear fruit. Their opinion was right and mine was wrong. But yourself and David Fraser, Patrick, one night you guys were on a pod. Again, I wasn't on it. I was listening to it, and I was getting to a stage I was quite happy with Borna Barisic. This is before the World Cup, and I was still thinking, no, Borna's getting back to being really useful. He's getting those crosses in. And yourself and David does this a lot. He just destroys, in the nicest possible way, he destroys a kind of preconception I've got by just hitting you with some hard facts. And you think, yeah, totally changes my thinking. You guys did the same. You make me feel kind of almost antediluvian, loving Borna. He's going to hit the byline and cross it style. Yilmaz, we know he's out for another 3 weeks, but you were saying, yourself and David were putting a great case as to why he should be ultimately preferred, not just an understudy to Borna. But now, since Borna's come back from World Cup, he's a numbers machine. He's getting the goals now. He's been getting the assists. Are you any closer to changing your mind about that, or do you still think ultimately Yilmaz is going to come in and take over, and should?
No, I haven't changed my mind, but I'm very happy to see Borna doing well. I think his style, in the sense that he is, at best, when he's playing well, a numbers machine, on the basis that he's probably one of the best crossers of the ball I've seen at Rangers and probably in general football, but he just struggles in most facets outside of that. So he is what we need now on our sort of in our wings and forwards, guys who just get numbers despite not playing that well, because he could put in a really poor game and still come out with an assist, which is good to him, and it's good for his numbers. And ultimately, hopefully, the best case scenario is he's playing well, but he only has 18 months left in his contract. Hopefully someone reads the assist column on BBC Sports Stats and sees a guy who's got 9 assists and like, oh wow, we'll throw some money at him, because I do think we're best positioned to probably sell him in the summer and get any money back we can. Say thank you for I think he's had probably, you can say, 2.5 good seasons and 2.5 bad to mediocre seasons. I think that first one he had was absolutely terrible, and he scored the goal, the free kick against St. Mirren, and then became the sort of second coming of Roberto Carlos, in the sense he was just sending balls and every free kick he thought he was going to score. But I just do think, on the basis of profiles, like, you could have Borna playing a 10 out of 10, but the basis of what he does just doesn't fit per se as well as what Yilmaz does. In a 7 out of 10 Yilmaz position or performance is more mutually beneficial for the rest of the side, in the basis of what he does, his tendencies, and how that fits in with the greater tactical scheme than what Borna does. That's not to say Borna can't be successful in this Rangers team. We've seen him do it for 2.5 seasons, and specifically in the last couple of weeks, he's looked better. But I just do think, on the basis of what Yilmaz does well, slip passes, penetrate the ball, make more advantage of the greater space, whereas Borna is very much Borna could be very good for any team in Scotland, on the basis that every team will have 2 or 3 opportunities to cross the ball, play it wide, whereas Yilmaz is fit for the sort of high possession system in which we can extrude peak sort of value out of him. And I think what we'll see is, hopefully, once he returns, I don't think it'll be that quick per se to get him playing immediately, just because Borna's playing well, and if he starts in 3 weeks, he's probably 5 weeks from being completely match fit. I think we'll see the best of him, hopefully. I really hope towards the end of the season, but if not, after a good preseason. And we have to remember, he's really, really incredibly young as well. So we've got the best part of what hopefully should be 4 years of his contract or whatever. But I do think the Borna situation will be one to have an eye on in the summer, because I wouldn't have been surprised last year if we let him go. But obviously, beyond what I probably would have suggested that we sold him last summer, it's good that we've kept on to him, because Yilmaz has been injured. So we need someone to play there. So I wouldn't be surprised if he leaves in the summer. But if he continues to do so at his current form, we might have to question that. But I still am firmly in the Yilmaz camp, but I'm obviously biased by the fact that I watched him for 2 years before he came, and I'm a fan of Turkish football. So,
aye, and obviously our thoughts, obviously with everybody in Turkey just now. A part of the world you know well, Patrick?
Yes, it's not the part of Turkey I know very well, but I have a lot of colleagues and people I've written with who have friends and family in the Hatay and Malatya, and have been sort of just completely paralyzed with anxiety and all that. So obviously we send our best wishes. If you can donate, there's a sort of literary of good GNOs to donate towards. It's sort of advised against donating to the government just because there is some sort of confusion as to what their motivations are, but I forget the name. But there's also a literary of footballers who are auctioning their football kits. So I think Mary Demiral, who's the Juventus centre-back, is auctioning his Messi signed jersey. So if someone has £100,000 to go and wants a signed Messi jersey and wants to give it to a good cause, there's examples of that. But if not, I think any money will be beneficial. And if not, just the support.
Aye, absolutely heartbreaking scenes, and hope everybody can kind of help them get their way out of that terrible situation. Yeah, and as I say, just every time I watch Borna now and I see how well he's doing, I'm actually, instead of thinking, oh, I'm right, I'm being proved right, I'm thinking, and Yilmaz is going to come in and we're going to be even better. It's like spoilt for choice. It's not an entrenched position, and entrenched position. Talking of which, the old European Super League, our favourite kind of social media arguing, social media battleground, it's raised its head again this week. It's no coincidence it's been a bit of a slow news week. But I think it's also no accident that Barcelona, Real Madrid and Juventus are essentially, behind the front of a PR company, are using a slow news week, a week when there's no European football being played to raise this issue again, kind of stealthily. I also feel it's kind of symbolic that this week of all week, we've got the Club World Championship final on Saturday night, featuring Real Madrid against not even an African side that never made a South American side, but against a Saudi Arabian side, as the Gulf state monies increasingly creeping into the game and kind of raising top European clubs to the standards. I got Russian money under Abramovich and also American money as well, but to the standards that we kind of saw in American sport. And the NFL, we've got the Super Bowl this week, and I felt as if when the Super League was raised as an issue, properly a couple of years ago, I just thought it was inevitable, and we'd probably see a kind of situation where it was a bit like the history of the NFL, where it starts off two rival leagues, become two conferences subsumed under the kind of the umbrella of the NFL, the Super Bowl kind of brings them together. It was just going to maybe UEFA, the countries who, PSG and Bayern weren't interested, but they would eventually, end up getting taken over. But do you think it's an inevitability, Patrick? And what do you think Rangers' position is in all of this?
I mean, I'm not sure if the European Super League is inevitable, but obviously we're shuffling in some capacity of the money and the competition dynamics will happen and is happening in the 2024-25 Swiss-style Champions League. I think it's what's being rebranded as, or that's the model. I haven't really looked at that even much. I think the Rangers position is that regardless of what happens, we'll be on the outside looking in. We might, on the basis of that, we have a fantastic fan base and we've been rising up the European rankings, we might be invited to assume a position in the second tier or whatever, but it would purely be on the sort of making the numbers. So whatever we do, firmly the sort of the people in Switzerland or wherever the Super League is based won't be thinking about Rangers when they're making their decisions, which is sad because I think clubs like Rangers and then across the continent and the world at our level are probably what makes football great. Teams in which they don't trade on sort of the necessity of trolling other fans and high quality signings and tons of money, but rather on just classic going to the games, making friends, and the sort of paternalistic ideals of football. Bring your son, and obviously daughters and mothers coming as well, but the traditional part of it and the sort of fraternal attitudes of it. So I don't think we're necessarily the case study, but I also don't want to sort of down anyone who wants to join it. I think it could be good. I'm a massive fan of the EuroLeague, which is the sort of Champions equivalent for basketball in Europe. And what they do is a league of 20 who plays each other twice or something like that. It's upwards of 30 games. And it's sort of a closed shop. There's 7 permanent members. And then 5 members have 10-year license. And then there's 6 who play in it for every year. And I really enjoy that. But I enjoy that on the basis that I don't support a European basketball team very much. I kind of like Fenerbahce just because of the football connections, but I have no real connection to any of the basketball teams. So I don't really care who plays. Obviously, I like to see the derbies. So when Real Madrid Barcelona play, it's fun, and Red Star and Partizan. So I'd love to see them there. But I'm there as a pure fan. So if I'm looking at the European Super League from that sort of casual fan who's living in the United States and doesn't have a local team sport, or is living in Saudi or in Singapore or in Japan, and they support their local team and they're looking to European football, I can't blame them for wanting to see the best teams play. As for me, I'm not really fussed because whatever happens, as I said, we won't be the centre of attention in any capacity. I'm happy and I've loved the European football and our outputs for the last 5 years, and I have to understand that's probably an anomaly in the greater sense that we won't have such extended, not dominance, but success at that point. But I would like for it to just continue as it is. I don't see any reason to reinvent the wheel. But if anything does happen with the Super League, I'll be a lot happier if Rangers' name's in it. But if it were to give me a sort of binary yes or no, I'd say no on the basis that what we have continues, because it's a good system. And European football generally has been ruined by money, and I don't see this as a sort of step towards that any more so than the Premier League getting $500 million a year or whatever is in the TV money.
I feel like the last proposal a couple of seasons ago, no relegation. That kind of reeked to me of the American the conferences, the franchise system. And I feel as a Rangers supporter, I was wanting to write it off, but I couldn't really, given that I know it was over 30 years ago, but Rangers were at the heart, we were foremost in the development of the Champions League, which was set up to kind of stave off the threat of what was always going to be a breakaway European league. And I think it's almost come to the point where we've got a European Super League, and I've lived from seeing us having 3 cups, and the Runners' Cup, European Cup, and the UEFA Cup, to we now have 3 leagues, and they're integrated. You get promotion from the Conference League into the Europa League. You get promotion from the Europa League into the, if you win the thing outright, you go into the higher competition. And last season, Rangers, I think, unfortunately, it was almost kind of laboratory conditions for us to find out exactly that, we would be at kind of championship levels, like a second tier side, doing so well, losing the Europa League with the narrowest of margins last season. And then absolutely stuffed beyond all belief in the Champions League when we stepped up a division this season. But I think a thing that's highlighted to me, which I kind of offshoot of this discussion, even last season, on our way to only the 5th European final in our history, a lot of Rangers fans were kind of almost saw it as a distraction, like going hysterical with Thursday night at Ibrox, and then going hysterical in a completely other way when we dropped 2 points to Motherwell the following Sunday, or dropped 2 points at Tannadice. It was almost as if they were more interested in winning domestic trophies than they were in European success. And this is something that's come up again just in a few days. I think it was just yesterday, actually, it was raised again, European Super League as a possibility, that people would rather us winning Scottish trophies than playing at the kind of highest level in Europe. It seems to be a misunderstanding. I don't get it personally. I understand aspect. Obviously, I want Rangers to win the league, win the Premiership. I want us to win, domestic cups. We're talking about that. But is there a kind of misunderstanding, this kind of thing of, the amount that you win is better rather than the intrinsic value of what you're winning? It's almost like that meme Celtic fans were setting out a couple of seasons ago that St Johnstone had won the League Cup and the Scottish Cup, and that was better than us winning the league because it was 2 trophies rather than 1. Is this kind of raised a difficulty with the Rangers support and how they actually see their ambitions for Rangers?
Yeah, I mean, as football fans, especially as Rangers fans, we're desensitized to success, obviously less so in the last few years. And we're all selfish and fickle, so we want to win what we're in, and when we're out of it, we want to pretend like that wasn't important, and the next one is more important. So let's say if we lose the League Cup, obviously hope not on, we'll then be saying, obviously, the Scottish Cup is the more important cup, and if we could only win one, it would be the Scottish Cup. I personally, I don't think most people would agree with this. I think it's probably a wildly unpopular opinion. I had more fun in our European run last year than at any point during the 55 league run. So I'm also of a different sort of caliber, or not caliber, but background than most Rangers fans. And obviously with the 55 behind closed doors, that also sort of not dampened it, but obviously made a different dynamic to it. But my epitome and my favorite part of football is obviously I enjoy going to watch Scottish Premiership games, but for me, there's nothing better than a team coming from overseas to play, and the vice versa, you getting to go to a different European city and play. But I equally understand why someone would love just the classic orthodoxy of winning the league, best team over the 38 games. But to me, I like going and playing against other teams in different countries. Obviously, that leads to less success in terms of trophies, but it's more relative success, as beating Dortmund versus winning the League Cup. Obviously, the League Cup provides you with a trophy. It goes down written in the embers of history, but the pure adulation and underdog nature of beating Dortmund to me was probably better than the League Cup, in my opinion. And again, I know that will be wildly unpopular, but those are the sort of single events in history or in your lifetime that probably won't happen again, on the basis that we won't play that team again. We're not guaranteed to play them 4 times as we do in the league. And that is forever etched, and there might be banter between the clubs for years to come, like when we beat Galatasaray, and that sort of storyline after that imbued all over. And that would never happen in Scotland, because we would have far too many times to rewrite that story. So I like the sort of distinct, almost patchwork nature of European football. But again, if you were to offer me sort of in 10 years straight, 30 or 3 treble each season for 10 years in Scotland, or like 1 Europa Conference League trophy, I'd obviously pick the domestic success. It's all relative. And hopefully the best case scenario is we finally are able to mesh the season of the 55 win with the season after with European finals. But obviously that would be maybe a bit too much I'm asking for.
No harm in asking for too much. I just thought it'd been quite funny if we'd actually gone, if we'd won that Europa League. We could have turned around and said, well, a Europa League and a Cup Winners' Cup must be better than a European Cup won in 1967, going by that same maxim, that same rubric. But no, I feel as if I was the same as yourself, Patrick. I was totally like, even getting in a European group stage, to me, get through a European group stage was worth more than the League Cup. A Dortmund was worth more than a Scottish Cup, because nobody outside of Scotland that gives a hoot about who even wins the league here. It's about, your European profile. But having seen the worst home defeat of my life in Europe this season, I've maybe been forced to change my mind. And I'm all about the Scottish Cup on Sunday and the League Cup in a few weeks' time. Listen, I better end it there. We've gone over the hour, folks. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to Patrick. A big thank you to him for his time and his highly enjoyable observations. And a massive thank you to all of you for watching and listening. Don't forget to give us a like and hit that subscribe bell if you like what we're doing here. And of course, we also have a fantastic Gers website, recently given a plush refurb, where you can engage and chat about tonight's pod and all other matters of Rangers on our friendly discussion forums, as well as dipping into a host of great articles penned by our esteemed band of contributors. I will be doing a bit of post-match reaction outside Ibrox after the game on Sunday, hopefully with Colin Armstrong. But Colin will have to get himself up the road pretty quickly, especially after the extra time and the penalties from outside Ibrox to get back home to host Sunday evening's main pod, where he'll be joined by John McCallum and Stuart Weir to review what is hopefully a great victory against Thistle on Sunday. But in the meantime, folks, thanks very much for joining us, and talk to you again soon. Good night.